And let's go ahead now and get ready to chant the refuges slowly. It's sort of spiritual dharma, self-soothing. And we're watering this attitude, this intuition that it's hard to describe exactly, but you know that game we had when we were teenagers and some friends would stand behind you and you could fall back and they'd kind of catch you. And we're not saying that the world doesn't have meanness or there isn't uncertainty. But is there something that is a true refuge? And our intuition may be imperfect. Our sense, we don't want to sort of create a rosy picture, and then try to compel ourselves to believe in it. Oh, it's going to be okay, or anything like that. But one thing we can do, and hopefully we have been doing, is in the normal push and pull of life, good times, challenging times, ordinary times, hopefully we've experimented with a kind of settling, a kind of relaxation and opening, dropping in, letting things be. And the cumulative experience of all those moments might have built up some momentum of trust that maybe we can let nature, the nature of our mind, the nature of our body, the nature of the world, the nature of what is beautiful and the nature of what is despicable. Maybe the refuge isn't so much that this is perfect or I'm going to end up in a perfect place, but that the allowing or the opening itself is really trustworthy. The saying yes in that, from that balanced, clear, non-idealistic place, non-romantic place, that's actually the refuge, as opposed to hating life or having some superficial idealistic idea that we cling to. That's not a refuge. That's a setup. But this more realistic, more grounded, arising from a more integrated presence. And this actually relates quite a bit to our work with the hindrances, because otherwise we can imagine that somehow refuge, freedom, is me transcending greed, me transcending hate and aversion, sleepiness, restlessness, doubt, and going into this heavenly space where my personality is perfect and I'm not pushed around by bad habits of mind. But even then, even if that were a thing, we'd be suspicious about what might be out there to contaminate my purity, like can't hang around with those people because they got bad habits and they might leak and stain me. And we'd end up being tight, even if somehow we ended up in a perfect realm with a perfect body and personality and perfect understanding. So this refuge, as we use our intuition and connect it with the chant itself, like what, even if we can't articulate it in words, but what has the heart found is trustworthy? And it might be more the willingness to be open and to be connected. It's almost like, I know every way we articulate it can seem problematic, but something like everything's workable. And even if it's not workable and I'm freaking out because I'm overwhelmed with whatever's going on, maybe that's workable too. Like I don't have to presume that it's a problem if I'm really losing it. And you even notice this actually as a fruit of our practice, like some less than noble habit has been triggered in us and we really are acting out and it hurts and it's not good for those around us. But we'll even notice then a kind of space around the acting out, the reactivity. Oh yeah, sometimes it's like this. I really lose it and I make things worse. And it is like this. And I'm not going to make it even worse, right? So I can just start by making peace with being a fully imperfect human being who gets triggered and acts out in ways that are hurtful, harmful to myself and others. So just a little way to hold the refuge chant as we do that now. Buddhang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. And let's settle into our meditation posture. When you're ready, make any last adjustments. And because we'll mostly be talking about aversion or ill will, hostility, these patterns to strike out at ourselves, to strike out at others, as this second hindrance tonight, I thought it might be useful to begin our meditation with a forgiveness reflection, followed by a loving kindness reflection. And because each of us in our own particular way have this capacity to get angry, to want to hit back or to hate ourselves, to close down, to be afraid, to strike out, to be judgmental or critical. Because of these very natural tendencies, it's easy to cause harm. So bring to mind somebody who's been the recipient of your anger, your irritation, your judgmental mind. It might be a loved one. It might be somebody from decades ago. Just see who comes to mind. Somebody you at least momentarily threw out of your heart with anger. And then just imagining being with this person and with our own words in our own way asking for forgiveness. And it might sound something like this, but just listen to how I might do it, and then you'll find your own way. It's easy for me to be afraid, to be overwhelmed, and to act out, to strike out with anger and fear. And I'm really sorry for any harm that I've caused you. Being afraid, being controlling, being angry. So I'm asking now for you to forgive me. Please forgive me for my anger, my irritation, and my judgment. Please forgive me. Go ahead silently, of course, in your own heart, as if you were actually talking to this person or this group of people in your own way, asking for forgiveness as best you can. And do it a couple times. And if you want, after a few times, see if somebody else comes to mind, somebody who's been the recipient of your anger, your irritation, your fear. And take the time, you don't have to rush, just sensing what it might be like to be with them and in your own way, in a way that feels appropriate, asking for forgiveness for any harm that you might have caused. And the whole reflection really arises from this understanding that it isn't easy being a human being with our conditioned minds, with these habits of ill will and aversion and greed and all the other habits. And you can bring to mind next, when you feel ready, times in your life where you felt the recipient of other people's anger or ill will. It's probably best not to bring the most painful experience to mind, just something that was moderately painful for you. And just understand as you're imagining or remembering this experience that this person probably was hurting, that their anger, however it was expressed, it had roots in their own pain and their own misunderstanding. And how much healing there would be to go beyond the need to resent them or to hate them in response to the pain that they've caused us. So then in your own words, in your own way, just offer them forgiveness in a way that feels appropriate. And it might sound internally like this: I know it isn't easy being a human being. I know how easy it is to get triggered. So as best I can, I'm going to forgive you for any anger, any darts shot my way. As best I can, I forgive you. I no longer want to be the person who's resentful or has to throw you out of my heart. So again, as best I can, I forgive you for any harm that you might have caused. Something like that. So just try it a few times with the first person you brought to mind. And then if it feels appropriate, see if somebody else wants to come to mind. Take time remembering, and then in your own way, in your own words, offer that person forgiveness as well. And finally, we can forgive ourselves. All the little and big ways we've hated ourselves and judged ourselves and felt guilty about our behaviors and our thoughts. As best I can, I forgive myself for being a human being with all these tendencies to be judgmental, for example. As best I can, I forgive this conditioned heart, forgive this life, I forgive this world for being the way it is. And don't be afraid to use phrases in your mind, in your heart. We need to actually act on the intention to forgive. We need to verbalize it in some way or act on it in some way. in order to notice the effects. As best I can, I forgive myself. And we'll move right into metta, a loving kindness reflection. My teacher, Joseph Goldstein, once used the image of cool water, drop by drop, hitting red hot metal. And there'd be a little reaction as the red hot metal immediately evaporated the drop of cool water. But over time, drop by drop, the red hot metal would begin to cool. So you can think of these loving kindness phrases, these loving kindness wishes that we're going to be generating. It's like we're planting wholesome seeds. We're uncovering the capacity of the heart to be loving and generous in that way. And we'll begin by reflecting on our own life right here, this tender heart and this tender body, and all these tendencies of my heart to do this, to think this way or that way, habits of mind, habits of heart. As best I can, I care about this life right here. And you might want to repeat these phrases silently in your mind, or come up with your own. I do, in fact, care about this life. How do I know? Because I'm willing right now to be close and to simply feel what's here to feel, this body sitting, feeling the quality of the heart right now, however it might be. I'm willing to be close. I'm willing to relax and be receptive. Feel what's here to feel. And central to our loving kindness practice, I'm willing to wish well for myself, for this life right here. To actually generate a simple, loving wish. May I be safe and protected from harm. And may wisdom and love protect me always. And may this tender heart of mine know real happiness and peace. May this body here be healthy and strong. And may I take care of this life with ease through all the twists and turns. May I be safe and protected in all ways. May wisdom and love protect me always. And may this tender heart right here know real happiness and peace. And may the body be healthy and strong. And may I live this life with ease through all the change. We'll go through the traditional phrases one more time. May I be safe and protected. And may the deepest wisdom and love protect me. May this tender heart here be happy and peaceful. And this body, may it be healthy and strong. And may I take care of this life with ease through all the change. And just continue on your own. You can use these phrases or just have a simple phrase that you repeat, but one way or another, feel this giving of good wishes, good love to yourself, to this life right here. Don't be shy. Don't fall into the thought that, oh, this is silly. Just try it. This simple willingness to send, to give ourselves this loving wish for well-being. And pausing after each phrase for a few seconds and just sense the sincerity behind the offering of the wish. And in particular, as you continue in a relaxed way, feel the generosity, the upwelling of goodness in the heart. And if this upwelling, this generosity of heart is clear enough, strong enough, you might not need any phrases, any verbalization of your good wish for yourself or for others. You can just feel directly, sense directly the upwelling of love, the generosity of the heart, like a giving away of goodness, except it just doesn't run out. There's always more to give. In all directions, above and below, everywhere and every way. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, all the loved ones in my life, all the neutral folks that I know, and even the difficult people. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world with metta, with love, abundant, exalted, boundless. I will abide. I'm just getting interested. What do I need to keep in mind that is a support for this beautiful attitude, this generosity of the heart that's good and loving and kind and wishes well? And again, the Buddhist words were something like, I will abide, pervading all quarters, with this heart imbued with love, with this friendliness, above and below, all around, everywhere, in every way, including to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world with love, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, boundless, free from ill will, free from hostility. I will abide. Noticing the heart that is free from aversion, free from ill will, just as best you can. So that we're learning how to keep friendliness, this basic goodness of the heart in mind. The heart that's not afraid, the heart that's not throwing anybody out. May all beings be at ease in this messy, uncertain world where we're all being pushed around by our habits, our conditioned habits. May we all be at ease. May we know the causes for happiness and real happiness. May we be free from suffering and the root cause of suffering. May our hearts be at ease. Take a little time, adjust the body. Good to be with everybody tonight. So tonight we'll begin to reflect on the habits of ill will. You know, we often talk about aversion, but as a hindrance, we're really talking about when aversion builds into this response of hostility or ill will, right? And I think the word that's used actually has connotations of striking out, whether we're going to hit ourselves or hit somebody else because of the frustration. Because there's aversion that's not necessarily unskillful, right? You know, when it's too hot and we turn away from the heat. That doesn't necessarily need to involve ill will. And one of the things we'll find, you know, as we just investigate places where there's some aversion, and then that curiosity, is there ill will? Is there hostility here? The one example that some of you have heard me give from the tradition is somebody rowing a boat in the middle of the night on a big river, like the Ganges River, and rowing, and ram into another boat. And they got a lantern, and they're, you know, lighting the lantern or grabbing the lantern to find out who is the idiot, you know, that wasn't watching out. And they're cursing and screaming, and by the time they actually look, they see that there's nobody in the other boat. It's just been floating on the river. And that's the thing about ill will or anger. It needs a target. We need somebody to hate, somebody who's responsible. It could be ourselves, of course. And that helps us, because when our mind is, you know, the image the Buddha uses for ill will, like I think Shelly and I mentioned the last few weeks, with desire, it's you know, it's like being in debt, the kind of mind state. And the Buddha likens ill will to being sick. It's like a sickness. And part of the expression of that sickness is we can't take our attention away from the object of our anger. We keep looking at the thing that we think is causing our discomfort, whatever it is. Could be ourselves, could be our boss, it could be our partner, it could be somebody who's making noise at night. We keep bringing them to mind. And there's that vortex, you know, we bring the thing or the person to mind who we think is the cause of our anger. And when we bring that to mind, it activates the anger. And then the activation of anger makes us want to think of that person again. And thinking of that person again is the cause for the wave of anger. And then that makes us... Now, where is all that happening? In the mind. We think, no, that person, but that's an idea in the mind. That sound is in my mind, being known in my mind. It's like when somebody says to us, you know, you make me so angry. We don't realize how disempowering that is to us when we say that to somebody. You make me so angry. It's like, I can't help but be angry given what you've done, or given what the world has done, or given what the weather has done. We imagine we're this innocent victim, and somebody does something, and I have to be angry. But is that actually true? Or is it a choice? And one of the things for all of the hindrances, and it's a really good, I guess, way to perceive whatever it is that's disturbing the heart, hindering the stability and balance of awareness, to get interested. This is sort of the wisdom aspect, to get interested in what's feeding this quality of the heart, this attitude, and how does it starve? Or, we could break it down even more, like when I perceive, when I look at what, when I pay attention to what, does this arise? When I relate to, once it's arisen, when I relate to it, in what way does it persist? When I relate to it in another way, does it diminish? When I relate to the present moment, in what way does it not arise? And we want to know that for greed and for hate and for dullness and for restlessness and for doubt. Because all of these obscurations, what clouds, what oppresses our mind, they are natural processes. They arise, and the kind of main ingredient feeding, determining these natural processes are just our habits of paying attention. Like, what are we paying attention to and how are we paying attention? And one of the expressions of real ignorance is we think that the way I'm paying attention is the only way in this moment to be paying attention. We don't realize that there are all kinds of choices happening given how I'm paying attention. That we could be paying attention to the present moment right now in a way that would be onward leading to a lot of metta, a lot of loving kindness getting established in the mind. Or I could be relating right now what I bring to mind and how I relate to what I bring to mind could be such that I'm really generating a lot of anger, feeding it, getting it stronger. And just ask yourself, isn't there a way that you could, in the sort of field of your present moment experience, isn't there something you could do with your mind to whip up a lot of anger? It might be bringing to mind a particular politician and what they did, or it might be bringing to mind a relationship that's happening now or happened in the past and what someone didn't do or what someone did, and then really persisting certain notes, certain mental images, certain feeling tones. It's like making a particular stew. You just like a little of this and a lot of that, and all of a sudden, huge victimhood or huge, strong, powerful, creative sense of wanting revenge. How important it is. Almost like sometimes we feel like I am personally responsible for making sure karma happens. That person deserves karma, the karmic fruits of their unskillful behavior. And gall darn it, I'm the one to deliver it. I better get on it and do it right, because it would all fall apart that's how we feel. It's just amazing what we can rationalize when we pay attention in certain ways. If this seems a little far-fetched, just look what human beings have done throughout human history. Where did those actions come from? They were justified. Humans have the capacity to justify incredible greed and incredible hate. And the Buddha says, the point isn't to hate our habits of hatred. And nor is it going to be helpful to ignore our habits of hatred or ill will. The practice, of course, is to get interested and to see them as teachers. Some of you might remember, people of my generation and even a little older, a lot of us read Carlos Castaneda's books back in the day when they came out in the 70s and 80s, I guess. And his teacher, according to the books, Carlos's teacher, Don Juan, shaman from Mexico, had this sort of teaching of petty tyrants. Some of you might remember that, right? And I think where one of the places, at least in one of the books where it comes up, Carlos is complaining about some difficult person in his life. I think it was a boss who was just really a jerk and oppressive, taking advantage of, something like that. And I forget exactly the details, but something like Carlos was going to leave the job because the boss was so, outrageously oppressive and mean. And Don Juan is saying, "What? You don't realize what you've got. You've got this petty tyrant." And he goes on to talk about these teachers. These are essential teachers. The things that irritate us. It might be mosquitoes, or we've got some mice coming into our house so that I can't kind of figure out how they're getting in, and it's these different places where we feel threatened or exposed or humiliated or betrayed. And of course, when you hear this, you might want to go immediately to the most overwhelming difficulty that's evoking a lot of hate or fear or anger. But it might be better just to imagine a more middling place of anger in your life and just reform it as a teacher. Literally, actually, I can actually sense some gratitude. You have something to teach me, because I can visualize, I can sense how powerful it would be for me to no longer be afraid, to no longer throw you out of my heart. I still may need to keep my distance, so it's not saying that, we're going to be buds and I'm going to be undefended when I'm around you. I still may need to, do some really strong interventions in terms of what I say to you, or whether I'm around you, or whether I call the police or whatever, right? Loving someone doesn't tell us whether we call the police or not. Right? It's really just whether the heart is justifying ill will and hate and fear, or whether the heart can take care of ourselves without the hate, ill will, and fear. Do what the appropriate response might be. Like that famous teaching from Shantideva, some of you know because the Dalai Lama repeats it so often. A lot of people think the Dalai Lama said it, but he's quoting Shantideva, this 9th century Buddhist monk from India. And he wrote this treatise called The Way of the Bodhisattva. And in the later Buddhist traditions, this ideal of the Bodhisattva kind of transformed from the original meaning. Right? The original meaning is quite simple. It's somebody on their way to being a Buddha. So the Buddha before his deep insight was a Bodhisattva. And in Pali it's Bodhisatta. And but in the later traditions they kind of made it into this really beautiful ideal of compassionate action. Somebody vowing to continue showing up until all beings are free. It's just a part of a more general movement of this intention, this motivation behind the practice, practicing for the benefit of all beings. So Shantideva has this really simple teaching, and this is a rough paraphrase, but when we're facing difficulty that would otherwise trigger aversion or hatred, ill will, or fear, resentment, irritation, all the different expressions of ill will. If there's something you can do in this difficult circumstance, well then of course do it. And if there's nothing that you can do right in this moment, well then there's nothing you can do in this moment. But in either case, whether the situation is such that there's something you can do that might help to take care of yourself, or in this situation, as far as you understand, there's nothing you can do, why get tight? Why be aversive? And that's really part of the study this week when we're highlighting aversion. I mean, the first step is really to be able to distinguish between aversion and the object. So it might be helpful for all of us just to bring to mind something that for you triggers aversion and ill will. And it might be a particular relationship, it might be a particular political situation where you have this ill will toward those people with power doing things that they're doing, maybe to protect themselves at the cost of harming others, or something like that, and you feel this self-righteous anger. How dare they? Where are those karma gods delivering the just desserts to the, mean-spirited people out there? That's what we want, right? I wouldn't cause them harm because it's God's job, That's why you have those lightning bolts. You're supposed to smote people who act in despicable ways. I mean, that's what we want. And we imagine it. Right? I mean, think about, so let's just do that now, whoever that is. A lover that betrayed you, a politician that's, in your sense, betraying people who don't have power or whatever. And what we want to do is, whatever the memory or the mental image of the target of our anger is, to distinguish that image or that experience from the actual ill will. To kind of see that there are two things. There's the trigger, the idea, the mental image, the memory that triggers, and then the thing that it triggers, which is the emotion of ill will. Because when we get a little momentum of anger, it's like, have you caught yourself? The mind is actually looking for other targets, other things that make me angry. Potholes, people who don't pick up their dog poop, and this and that, and because of that dance I described earlier, where there's some memory, some mental image, some idea triggering another image the Buddha uses. He calls anger murderously sweet. There's something very juicy and seductive. It's enlivening. And one image that's used is boiling water, right? And in the same way that it's obscuring, or illness, like just caught in my, when you have one of those terrible head colds, and you're just leaking and the head is under pressure and you're just consumed. It can't escape. And to really see take the attention. So this is a strategic move where, if we can, we take the attention off of the idea, the mental image, the trigger, and we bring the attention to the experience of anger, ill will itself. And what do we notice when we bring the attention to the ill will itself? Sylvia Boorstein summed this up perfectly. She said, ill will hurts. It does. And that's so grounding. Oh, being angry really hurts. Now, I know we kind of already know that intellectually, but when we're in that vortex, where we're triggering by what we pay attention to, we're triggering the anger, and then the feeling of the anger triggers us to want to find the trigger, which triggers more anger, right? And there's that feedback loop. And we're kind of getting high in a weird, oppressive way off of the energy of the anger. We're feeling sort of definitively like me who's angry. There's very few senses of self that have more solidity than like self-righteous anger or being really oppressed. The quality of one's self-identity, the stickiness of identity when we're angry it's like we might be really suffering, it may be really painful, but we feel solid. And on a deeper, more subtle level, that's important to this natural, impersonal system of delusion. It's become addicted to the sense of solidity itself, regardless of the cost or the pain. So one way, and I'll talk about a couple ways before we're done, and I'll save some time for questions too tonight. But when we have enough stability, we're not completely overwhelmed, we do that process that I've been talking about where we notice that we're suffering, that we're angry, we're caught in the vortex, the spinning of anger, of ill will, revenge fantasy. Remember, fear is an expression of ill will, right? I mean, a certain kind of fear, obsessive fear. And so then we do this Dharma move where we specifically ask the heart, don't pay attention to the triggers, because what's really important is you're angry. That's actually what's predominant right now. So let's be real. Let's acknowledge, anger's like this. Ill will's like this. Hating is like this. So we're sort of dropping right into the attitude itself, not the cause for the attitude. And then that, of course, gets us closer to, it hurts. There's anger, and then there's the unpleasantness, the oppressiveness of the anger. Can I be with that? This is relevant that it hurts. And of course, we can only do that with some wisdom and kindness. It's an act of compassion. It's only in a way, the very definition of compassion is that awareness that can meet suffering. So when we realize that ill will hurts, that's suffering, right? And then I'm going to meet that pain of the ill will with that compassionate, that wise and compassionate presence. And the key about that is then I'm no longer feeding the aversion. Because for aversion, that aversive pattern to be fed, we need to engage that feedback loop that I was talking about. We need the target. And in that example I gave where the person in the boat takes their lantern and looks at the other rowboat and sees that it's just floating there, right? I mean, the person, if their mind is nimble enough, they can start to hate the person who didn't tie that boat down carefully enough or something like that. But in the first moment of seeing that the person that they've been cursing at doesn't exist, there's kind of this implosion. And it's sort of, if you've had other things happen to you where you they didn't really lend themselves to blaming anybody, even if it's a bad thing. I forget who it was that was telling me this story. It might have been Michelle McDonald, who is an IMS teacher, and she been living on Hawaii and Oahu for a long time. And I think she had just pulled off by one of these beaches, and she was talking to, I guess, a student of hers, somebody she knew, and he had put his surfboard on top of his car but hadn't yet tied it down. And they were just talking, in the parking lot. And then some wind just sort of swept in, lifted the surfboard off of his car, and it went crashing and did some damage to another car, that was 15 feet away or something like that. Just some strange gust of wind, And it's like nobody's fault. But just the kind of, it's interesting when something like that happens where you really want to get angry, but you catch your mind kind of in need of a scenario, a story that provides the target that justifies the anger. Because otherwise, it's just a matter of two people having a conversation. Well, anybody have insurance that could cover this? Like, what are we going to do about this? I'd like to hate you, but it's really hard to blame you for this. You didn't really do anything wrong or even stupid. Right? You were just paused for a moment and tying down your surfboard, and something weird happened, or whatever it might be. And of course, that's always the case. Like, even when we have that idea of somebody with a lot of power doing really bad stuff with the power that they have that harms a lot of other people, even that really unskillful action, there are causes and conditions that make that the way that it is, that it can't be other than the way that it is. These greedy people, these oppressive people, these naughty people, given all of the causes and conditions, as I think one writer said, if we knew the secret history of our enemies, would they be our enemies? If we knew all of the causes and conditions behind somebody's action, the parent that didn't love them, or the this or the that, whatever it was. It's not somehow taking responsibility away from people, but just understanding that in a very real way, we're just expressing causes and conditions. And the more we know that, our heart breaks open. And the last thing we want to do is feed the beast. Feed more ill will, more hostility, more ignorance. So that's one thing. I know Sayadaw Tejaniya, he just says, okay, there's ill will, and then separating the object or what we imagine as the cause from the actual experience of ill will. Oh, this is ill will, it hurts. Can I be with the feeling of it, the feeling tone, the unpleasantness of it? When I'm with the unpleasantness of the ill will, do I still need ill will? Because one of the things we start to discover, the more we just get interested, in any of the hindrances, but in this case, ill will, is that the whipped up Mark, when he's irritated and angry and self-righteous or whatever the expression might be, it's actually a very inefficient, unhelpful way to avoid the unpleasantness that I'm experiencing. So when I find my way back to, it's really unpleasant right now, then all of a sudden being angry doesn't have a purpose, because I have the capacity to feel whatever I'm feeling. Oh, this relationship is over and it really hurts. it really hurts like this. And in those moments when we can meet what it feels like, and even bringing in some metta to stabilize, to bring in some confidence that I can actually be with this hurt, this unpleasantness, then all of the loops of revenge and betrayal and oh poor me or whatever, the different expressions might be, they just aren't needed because we can be right with the feeling tone of it. And it, either quickly or slowly, the whole latent tendency to get whipped up into the anger collapses because it needs all those parts. And especially that part of, I can't be with this unpleasant feeling, so I'm going to act out. Because it creates, at least in this temporary kind of way, a sense of distance from the pain that is inevitable in life, the pain of disappointment and loss and stuff happening. Gain and loss, pain and pleasure, praise and blame, fame and disrepute, the 8 worldly winds that the Buddha talks about. And one of the reasons I did the forgiveness and the loving kindness reflection tonight during the guided meditation is just this understanding that it really helps this possibility, it's a protecting quality, because when we've activated the attitude of metta, it's a generosity of the heart that can just as easily go toward ourselves. Oh, you're getting triggered. You're feeling betrayed. This is irritating for you, and I care about that. Life is hard. Anything can happen anytime, and you're getting some real difficult experiences now, and I care about that. It's hard for you. And I'm not going to abandon myself. And I forgive myself for all of these impulses to want to hit back, or wanting to give up on life, or whatever my aversive response might be. I forgive myself. Of course you're feeling that. Of course you want to hit back. Of course you want revenge. Of course you want something bad to happen to that person. Ill will hurts, and you're feeling that. And the metta is like a balm. It's a protecting balm. And it's preventative too. The more generosity of the heart we have, just notice how things that would otherwise trigger ill will, we just have compassion. Somebody cuts us off on the highway, and it's like, oh, you must be having a really bad day, driving dangerously like that, It can't be easy. I'm really happy I'm not you, because I just have a sense that your heart hurts. And the last thing I'd do to myself is make myself hurt by getting angry at you. We think we're being so nice to other people, but in the Buddhist tradition, I don't know if the Buddha said it himself, I think he might have, but I think he used the image of, could be like a metal ball, and it might even be feces too. Like if you want to throw it, who's going to get dirty or burnt first? And that's the thing, we really get that down in our bones, how unhelpful aversion or ill will is. When aversion gets combined with this egoic, identified, we're identified with being the one who's been harmed. We can't avoid being harmed or hurt, insulted, because being alive means, there's up and there's down. So that's going to happen. but we don't have to personalize the insults that come our way. And when we do, we take it as a teacher. Oh, look at that. That's how suffering gets constructed. And it's that construction's happening here, in my heart, in my mind. Not as I imagine you did it to me. No, it's happening right here. And that's a real superpower when we see that, like, oh, I don't have to take the bait. I don't have to construct that heavy, that heavy state of mind. So we have the deconstruction that I talked about. We have the preventative work of just getting familiar with the flavor of metta. And remember, initially we think of metta as this sort of glorious, friendly, wholesome state. But actually, technically, metta, loving kindness, is the absence of ill will. It's less about it being a something, like a particularly beautiful attitude of mind. It is a particularly beautiful attitude of mind, but its presence is about what's not there. There's not ill will active in the mind. So check. No. Is there ill will? And it's like develop radar for ill will, and we can really get a sense how keeping metta in mind, keeping that basic goodness, that basic friendliness in mind. And it's like rewiring, so it becomes more and more the predominant. You know, it's true, because when we think of our whatever number of friends we have, there are some people who have a stronger tendency, nature, to be friendly among your friends, and some of them have a more strong tendency to be aversive and have ill will and being curmudgeons or whatever, grumpy types, irritable ones. And how do they become the way they are? Well, causes and conditions. So we can consciously participate. What sort of seeds are we planting? How do we become, over time, somebody with a friendly, generous, loving heart? We notice friendliness. We keep it in mind, and we have confidence that there's always that capacity for goodness and friendliness. Always. And then even when it's not the dominant quality, maybe irritation right now is the dominant, but I don't feed the irritation by bringing my attention to what's irritating. I notice something maybe initially quieter, like I care about how the irritation hurts. I mean, I really care, not like I should care, but I actually care. Oh, this is hard for me right now, that this traffic is really pushing my buttons. So I don't need a different moment. Whatever the moment is, there's a way, and how we pay attention and what we pay attention to, we need this initial confidence. There's always a way to be planting seeds for metta, and there always are ways to be planting seeds for ill will. And it's a choice. And we may not want that responsibility, but then we're just left to habit energy. But when we take that responsibility, actually we start to feel empowered. Okay, so if actually the choice exists right now, how can I be showing up right now in my life so that because of how I'm paying attention here to what's going on now, how I'm paying attention to what I'm paying attention, how can I be growing the habit of loving kindness and shrinking and starving the habits of ill will? And how about like when we read the news, are we feeding ill will? Or when we're doing this, talking to this friend, like we might have a particular friendship where we do a lot of gossiping and we're just, we just now in hindsight or upon reflection, we realize, oh, I'm mostly planting seeds of ill will when I'm hanging out with that person. I either need to reform that relationship, have a talk with that friend, or I have to stop hanging out with that person. And maybe I'll hang out with this other person. Because we water wholesome seeds, and that's in a way, in a Buddhist sense at least, the definition of a good friend is that person is interested in watering, like relating together in a way where we're watering each other's wholesome seeds, and we're not watering seeds of ill will and greed and doubt. And you know how it is, like someone's complaining about some breakup, and we could just like get into trash talking this person that they broke up with, And we can tell ourselves we're supporting our friend, but we just have to look at our own heart, like what are we setting in motion? We just need enough reflectiveness, enough interest, and we'll know like what sort of seeds are getting reinforced and strengthened. What am I feeding? What am I starving? So the basic, like what the Buddha says in the text, so it got recorded in the text, what feeds ill will are those thoughts, images, experiences that trigger ill will. When I bring this to mind, ill will grows. So we can directly see. Or when I bring this other thing to mind, so like when I'm noticing the irritant, I get irritable. But stop noticing the irritant. It's like we got a little sliver or a little hangnail or whatever, and we just, it starts to bug us. It's like, I can't wait till I get home and I get a nail clipper and it can be like this huge aversive thing going on in our mind. But it's because the mind has been obsessively paying attention to this. There's 9 billion other things to pay attention to in the moment, but we pay attention to one little thing, one little ouch, or piece of food in our teeth, or somebody who's doing something in the room that we think is stupid, or wore something that we think is stupid, but we can't help ourselves. And even when we're not looking at them, we know that they're there, and they wore that. I can't believe they wore a t-shirt that says that, It's like, I got to talk to Mark about that. That shouldn't be allowed. People get weird in these ways. These on retreats, because the mind gets concentrated, people can get in these aversive vortexes where they really, there's one story that gets told at a retreat center, from a retreat center this long ago, near Palm Springs by Joshua Tree National Monument in Southern California. And it evidently, I haven't been down there, but evidently a lot of the planes flying into LAX, the airport at Los Angeles, go over there. And so, 9-day retreat, someone just starts getting irritated by the jets flying overhead. And it just, and finally, this is like the height of delusion. And this is what aversion does, your will does. It's like, writes a note to the teachers, somebody's got to call Los Angeles International Airport, but they were totally serious. It's like, this is not okay. Yeah, and that kind of delusion, because we live in our constructed realities. And we see this with ill will, like how we can really turn somebody into a monster and they're just another suffering human being like the rest of us. But we turn them into this incredible monster. And then we can really justify terrible actions against them because we've made them into, some subhuman. So why don't I leave it here? We have 10 minutes. See if there are any questions. In the room or online, people online, you can raise your digital hand If you don't know how to do that, it's under reactions there at the bottom. If you click that, one of the choices will be raise hand. And otherwise, people in the room, you can just let me know. I'll hand you the mic. You can sit on the bench and say something. Yeah. Your own learnings about aversion, or just how to work with aversion, or anything that was confusing in the talk. People online can also, if it's short, write something in the chat if you want. What comes to mind? Next week we'll have small groups. And our job this week, and I put some articles in the email that I sent out earlier this afternoon for some background study. But the idea is that you take the week and you really study, both in your formal sitting time and all day long, planting seeds for aversion and ill will, getting to know, dropping in, feeling tone, sensing the immunity when the heart is friendly and there's some actual loving kindness. Yeah, anything come to mind? Yeah, please. Do you mind? Why don't you come up here so people online can hear you? I meant to move that bench a little.
Well, I was just thinking that I think a lot of times anger is really, there's a cause behind it. There can be a real legitimate cause behind it. And I think that anger kind of, it becomes this kind of energy that may allow you to do something about something that is legitimately wrong. I mean, I think sometimes people get angry over things that are not legitimate, but sometimes people are angry about something that's legitimately wrong, and that anger kind of drives them to maybe do something about it. And I know that it's better to do something about things without the anger, but I hope that people still do something when something is legitimately wrong. And how do you kind of separate out those things? Yes, you want to suppress the bad, but keep that good kernel and say, I want to change something that's legitimately wrong, and not forget that.
Yeah, really important comment. And of course, the real answer is we're gonna learn by observing our own actions and our own minds. And remember, when we use a word like ill will or hostility or anger is a little bit more neutrally used in English than hostility and ill will. So it might be better for us just in our own mind to use ill will and hostility, resentment, because whether you call it anger or say something like, my heart was moved to act, I could not act. I had to say something, I had to do something. But that movement, we don't have to call that anger. We could call that fierce compassion, right? I mean, compassionate action isn't passive. And so whatever it is, when the heart, it's more about like, I'm hurting. Like, this is one of the ways we know ill will is ill will. It's like we want the others to hurt. But when some injustice is happening and action is needed, we don't want someone to hurt. We want the harm to stop. We want the injustice to be rectified, something broken to be fixed. But if we want that person to suffer, that's ill will. If we want that person to get off the street so they don't cause any more harm, and we do whatever we can to keep that person from causing harm, that might be compassionate action. But if that's not enough and we want that person to hurt, that might be ill will. And each of us have to figure this out for ourselves. We have to know the difference between that movement in our heart that allows us to do brave, courageous actions, to stick our neck out, because what we're seeing is not okay. And I can't stand for this. I have to do something. I feel moved because I sense the harm that's being done, and it's breaking my heart open, and the energy of that break is leading me into action. And I think that's why it's such an important point not to presume, to equate non-ill will with passivity or just letting people walk all over us. Yeah, thanks for that. Colleen, did you want to go next? You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, hi, thank you. My name is Colleen. Mark, you mentioned in the talk that sometimes fear is an expression of ill will. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, because sometimes when we're afraid, we turn, it's like that closing in on ourselves or hiding or shrinking. And it's oppressive, right? It's harmful to ourselves. And it's interesting, when we access real metta, we really keep that in mind, real compassion. It's amazing how the actual effect in the body, the heart and mind is a kind of undefendedness and receptivity. It's really the opposite of that fear. So, this would be a really important place to study, and it might come up in the small groups, Colleen, like where we look at places where we're fear. Fear is a little bit like anger in terms of how we use it in English. Because, I forgot your name, Wayne, was saying, anger, sometimes we use it as a skillful quality. So, and same with fear. Fear can be a very natural, useful quality, right? It's appropriate to be averse, to be afraid, maybe even angry, if we understand what we mean by that in terms of a strong response. But the fear that's ill will is when the mind is identified with the danger, with the sense of being someone in danger, and feels put upon and diminished by that, whatever the problem might be. And it's a kind of self-harm. We can imagine something like death, just because it's the big thing. And having an appropriate respect for how little we understand what death is, and the appropriateness, whether you call that fear or whatever word you might want to use, to talk about that proximity to the mystery and the quivering of the body and the mind in the face of that uncertainty, like what is death, and how often there's pain in that transition when the body's falling apart. But there can be, it's sort of like a not condemning life because there's death, or not drawing any conclusion whatsoever, just like normalizing it. Yeah, there's this mystery, that often involves physical pain that leaves me feeling this way, and then you describe how you feel when you think about your death and that transition and all that might imply, which we don't know because there's so many different ways that it unfolds. But not imagining that it's evil or bad. But certainly, at least in some ways in our culture, death is bad. so bad that we deny it and we bury it and we don't talk about it so much. Isn't it interesting, the people we love, when you think about the people we really love, and even people who are quite old who we love, how just we don't have the vocabulary or the permission to have honest conversations about death. I mean, it's better maybe now than it was, but it's sort of like a taboo. Sorry, Mary, didn't get to your comment or question. Hopefully you can maybe write me an email and I'll pass it on, or you send it to Shelly. Shelly's talking next week, and Shelly will introduce dullness. And remember, dullness isn't just sleepiness, it's just when like a heavy wet blanket on the mind, and restlessness, too much, too little energy. And then in order to be a hindrance, it's not just too little or too much energy, it's identified as being the person with too little or too much, right? And that's when these dullness and restlessness become oppressive. I'll come back in 2 weeks and talk about doubt, and then Shelly will come and do the last week and talk about the other defilements, all the other, like conceit and fixed views, helplessness, impatience. So the different expressions of these qualities of mind that hinder stability and wisdom and kindness too, for that matter. Good, so wishing you all good conversations next week in the small groups. Really nice to be here with everyone. Hope to see you in 2 weeks, if not sooner. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.